Well, the Bible doesn't contain any recipes at all, but food plays an important part in many stories. Let's look at a few of those stories and see what was cooking.
In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve ordered fruit for two. Not all food is good for you.
The tradition of Passover meal is central in the Jewish faith tradition, remembering symbolically the beginning of the great exodus from Egypt. So food can tell a story and carry history in every bite.
For Moses and the people of Israel, manna, that strange sticky substance provided by God, was the main thing that kept them alive. God is the source of all.
John the Baptist had a strange diet of locusts and wild honey. As odd as that sounds to us, though, he wasn't breaking any Jewish dietary laws.
Jesus fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Not only was this amazing, it showed great care and hospitality for all those hungry people.
You know, Jesus appeared to his disciples after the resurrection, and he actually made them breakfast. Food was his way of expressing love and care for them and reminding them that to follow him was a life of service to others.
These are just a few of the time and ways that food played an important part in the Bible stories we know and love. But that is all that's on the menu for today.
Thank you. So the inspiration for my talk this morning and for our theme today is the fact that I really do love the cooking channel. And so I'd like to share with you a poem that I wrote this week, and I've called it Ode to the Food Network. When day is all done and I put on my flannels, nothing makes me unwind like the cooking channels. When tired and weary and done for the day, I watch 30-minute meals with Rachel Ray. If I've talked on the phone till the talking's all stopped, I flip on the TV and cheer for the winner of Chopped. If I've worked on my sermon till there's nothing left to say, I like to watch Throwdown with Bobby Flay. When I can't read any more theology books, what suits me best is America's Worst Cooks. When the chores are done and the bills are paid, there's Iron Chef, down-home cooking, and almost homemade. The list could go on. I am never bored. With my DVR, I can always record. The cooking channel is such a winner, it almost inspires me to make my own dinner. But after my prayers, as I crawl into bed, it is visions of the cooking channel that dance in my head. Thank you. Thank you. I have been told again not to give up my day job. Food is so essential to us, and we know this, we absolutely know it. Our bodies require it. We get unhealthy, we get sick, we get weak, we even die if we don't have good food. And we certainly can't live fully if we aren't eating. I believe that our spiritual lives can learn a lesson from that. We ignore the needs of our spirit, and we cannot live fully. In fact, I think sometimes we ignore them so much we experience a kind of spiritual death. Food makes a really easy metaphor for when we speak about lives of the Spirit. And as I thought about this while watching my beloved cooking channels, I realized that the wise cooks and the chefs and the commentators maybe have something to teach us about nourishing our spiritual lives, more specifically about following Jesus. Let me start off with just a couple of little disclaimers, however, because following Jesus is not a competition, and many things on the cooking channels are competitions where there's winners and losers, and only one person is going to get the prize, and everything you do is compared to the efforts of others. And frequently, you're racing against the clock. Now, there's a way in which there's an urgency about some things in our lives, but in truth, Jesus took time with people. He took time when he was teaching his disciples. He took time with children. He was not in a hurry about relationships. Those, I think, are important things to notice. But having said those things, here are some things that I think Christians can learn from the cooking channel. First of all, it is important to know the basics. The names of the ingredients, the proper utensils, the cookware, how to use the equipment, how to run the appliances, how to read a recipe, the kinds of things I talked about with the kids. You can find your way to cooking by trial and error, but you can't really cook if you don't know the basics. As people find Hillview and want perhaps to be part of this community of faith, I have to ask us, are we able to offer the basics to them? And do we know some basics ourselves? Because you certainly can't share what you don't have. So I want you to check in with yourself for a second. These are, I think, the most basic tools that you need as kind of a starting point to create a life following Jesus. Do you have some basic knowledge of the Bible? Can you find your way around it and figure out where the different books are? Can you read it prayerfully, critically, and carefully? Do you know some of the specifics about Jesus' life and teachings and how they invite you to live in the love of God? And do you know the big story of God that sweeps through the Bible, showing how God moves in history? I think you got to have some basic Bible knowledge. And you also need to know just a little something about John Wesley and being a Methodist if you're at this church. I want to assure you that if you don't know some of that, we periodically offer a really basics course. And it's important because John Wesley and we who call ourselves United Methodists, we have something really critical for the 21st century about how to engage and let our faith come alive and be real. We need to know something of our own heritage. And you need to be familiar with this church. Have you read the tenets of this church? Do you know where they are located on the table just outside the doors? You need to have some working knowledge of how we have come and declared together to understand ourselves as a people of faith. Those tenets are how we try to work together and shape our life together. Now, I think those are basics, some Bible knowledge, some Methodist knowledge, and some knowledge of how this church understands its own journey. You can be on all different points on your journey. You may not even know what you believe, but you start with the basics, like learning to boil water or cook pudding without a frying pan. Now, once you know the basics, here comes the second thing. You can make it your own. Many of us have probably been asked for a recipe that was in our family for a long time, and when you go to share that recipe, you really have to think hard because you've stopped following the way it's written on that little recipe card or the way it is in the cookbook. Because you've made it so many times and you've tweaked a little of this and changed a little of that, you've made it your own and it doesn't match that basic recipe that's on that card. But people want to know how you make it. Well, making the teachings and the readings from the Bible your own, trying them on in your life. Experience the teachings when you have joy and when you have struggles, and figuring out how to share those in your own words, that is making the recipe your own. If you are simply sharing what someone else told you about Jesus, or if you're simply sharing what you first learned maybe when you were quite young, that is all well and good, but nobody, I'm pretty sure, is going to ask you for that recipe. So knowing the basics and making them your own, these are two things that the cooking channel offers as essentials. That brings us to the third thing. The more you explore about cooking, the more there is to discover. Now, I have been introduced, and I have actually been compelled to cook, with various kinds of paprika and curry. I always thought paprika and curry were the little thing in the little shillings tins. There are all different kinds of paprikas and curries. These are blends. And I have also tried pink peppercorns and Greek yogurt, which is so different than Yoplait. And I slice my vegetables in different ways. And I have fallen in love with Yukon Gold potatoes. I have branched out beyond the cooking channel, and when I'm in line at the grocery store, I pick up cooking magazines to bring home, and I look at the recipes, and I think about which ones I could make. I am presently hunting for a good recipe for stuffed grape leaves, like I had when I traveled in Turkey, because I think I could make them. The more I learn, the more I practice, the more curious I am, and the more bold I become. Bingo. The more we practice the teachings of Jesus, the more we learn about his life, the more curious and bold we become. Now, while watching the cooking channel, I have begun to realize, as I said, how much variety and possibility there is when we cook. And so that brings us to another thing that Christians can learn from the cooking channel. Be creative. Recipes and cookbooks and the cooking channel are all just ways to help amateurs like me discover what is possible when you cook on your own. Yesterday on the cooking channel, I watched a contest in which 2 people had to use blueberries, corn tortillas, roasted peppers, and violet-flavored mustard to make a dessert. And they did, and the judges said both desserts were very good. Now that's being incredibly creative with what you have in front of you. And one thing I think that happens in the institutional church, one thing that I think we've accidentally done, not just Methodists, but all kinds of churches, we have put ourselves in these little boxes and we've said, these are the forms, these are the rules, this is the way things are supposed to be. And we forget that every moment of our life is full with situations and circumstances and unique possibilities. God is creating all the time, and I think that's the way we're made in God's image, is to be creating all the time. What's in front of us? What can we do with the way our life has formed? The ingredients of our lives. Be creative, says the cooking channel, and, next point, enjoy it. Cooking is a pleasure, not just the eating part, but the cooking part as well. It's a way to express yourself. It is a way to be creative and imaginative. It's a way of taking what's in your cupboard and seeing what you can do with it. Life is meant to be enjoyed, whatever the mix of things that happens from day to day or moment to moment. It is meant to be enjoyed, and sometimes we know this. Sometimes it is much more complicated than others, trusting God in those spaces. There can be some pretty difficult ingredients in our lives and some pretty challenging spaces. More joy is possible when we are trusting God along the way, looking for the joy in the moment. The joy of cooking comes to fullness when somebody eats your food and appreciates it. And that's my final point for what Christians can learn from the cooking channel. Share. We can, and we do, quite literally share food at this church with others. Things like the offering we're going to be taking with the kids, the Super Bowl offerings. There are quite literally ways to teach people how to cook good meals for themselves and build nutrition. We could do this. We can and we do work for laws and ways to change our culture and the world's culture so that hunger and the concerns we feel is not such an issue in our state, in our nation, and on this planet. These are truly important things about sharing. But so is the way I'm using this little cooking metaphor to talk about our faith. If we know the basics about following Jesus, and we've made those our own, if we take the time to go deeper with our faith and begin to see how this offers amazing and surprising possibilities, and that gives us the courage to explore those, if we find ourselves really enjoying our journey with Jesus, we just have to share that. All of that. Amen.